Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's largest television platform for SMEs, MSMEs and startups. I'm Sunanda Jayasheelan. All of this week, we've continued to put the focus around International MSME Day, talking about the issues which are most pertinent to you with a series of experts and thought leaders. Today, I'm bringing a panel discussion with very well-known industry leaders, talking to you about what the future is looking like and their advice for you, the small business owner. Let me quickly jump in and introduce our panelists. First up, Ajay Srinivasan, he is Director at CRISIL Research. We have Vinod Kumar, President at the India SME Forum. We also have Vineeth Agarwal. He is the President at ASSOCHAM, also MD and Chairman of Transystem Logistics International. Gentlemen, thanks for your time here on the show. My first question is the outlook as far as the economy is concerned. As of 2020-21, there was a contraction of nearly 7.3%. But looking ahead, is it possible for you to predict what perhaps could be the big news that we hear on the economy and your advice for small businesses based on that?
Yeah, so I think when you look at the economic growth, it's important that we keep the context of fiscal 21 in mind. And you have had states also imposing localized lockdowns in the last few days and the last couple of months. I think the situation as it stands today, it appears to us that there will be some kind of restrictions on mobility which governments would like to impose, at least on paper, till about July or early August, till there is some certainty on vaccination and the pace of vaccination starts to pick up. After that, you may see economic activity gradually rebound. Not that it has already not happened. If you look at June numbers, also, June seems to be much better compared to May, in the first 9 to 10 days of June. But nevertheless, the first quarter is going to be a little bit more tepid than most of us had thought, maybe in January or February. So overall, our sense is that India's GDP growth this year will be about 9.5%, which is very similar to RBI's forecast. Uh, but here, I think it's very important to also appreciate that the pace of recovery will also be influenced by how quickly mobility comes back, but more importantly, vaccination. If we have a large portion of the population, say, vaccinated before the festive season, then possibly it helps a lot in actually buoying the
Okay.
festive season.
Currently, as we know, the second wave has also been quite brutal on the economy, in the sense that this time around, it is a more of a demand issue versus a supply issue. In the first wave, the factories were shut and there was no movement that was happening. Whereas in this time around, there is some movement happening. Factories have been running, though a little less in some areas, but the demand is not there. There is inventory build-up that started to happen. So it seems that the current situation, supply chains are intact, but it would take perhaps a little longer for the demand to come back. Some of it might happen with pent-up demand that has been built up in the last few months, 2-3 months. But more or so we feel that it will take a little longer till perhaps August, September for demand to really come back.
Well, couple of things that I'd like to share. One is that we've seen, with the lockdowns becoming local in nature or state-oriented in nature, a lot of states have taken recourse to a very different mechanism than was followed in the last lockdown in the first wave. So what has happened is that some states have curtailed complete movement of even essentials. Some have allowed essentials. Some have said that non-essentials should not be allowed. And some states have said, okay, we will do a graded opening up and all that. Now, for example, Punjab, which has allowed delivery personnel as essential staff and said that, we need to maintain demand on one hand, because otherwise, if we are only going to sell essentials across the country, what is going to happen to all the cyclic businesses, small and medium enterprises around the country? How are they going to operate? What will they do? On one hand, we say we need to look at both things. One is that we need to look at lives and livelihood. So if we are going to have one without the other, it's going to be a problem, and it's going to I would say become a much bigger problem later, like Ajay explained. Now, so that's number one. Number two is when we are talking about industry per se, whether it is essential, non-essential, we need to find mechanisms of allowing them to operate. They are willing to put out costs of accommodation, transport, looking at all the medical requirements, the healthcare requirements of their employees and all that. So we need to somehow figure out a mechanism of allowing them to operate and maybe prioritizing vaccination. Because finally, if we are unable to allow micro, small and medium enterprises to operate, how do you handle the employment problem? How do you handle the problem that is going to burgeon tomorrow into a much bigger problem in terms of unemployment, in terms of, also finally GDP? It's going to affect your GDP because if majority of your enterprises are not able to work.
The NPAs of MSMEs and SMEs is likely to be lower largely because, we have seen the extension of the emergency credit guarantee scheme, restructuring of loans, etc. So how are you really reading this data? Because on one hand, the headline is looking good, that NPAs are lower, but if you look at the details, it's because of several measures that have been undertaken. So are you happy? And if not, do you think this is perhaps just pushing the problem of NPAs to a much later date, and that it's going to come back at some point on the horizon? How would you read this? What is your advice? Do you think perhaps that then loans for the demand for loans and the rest of the fiscal is perhaps going to be lower? Our ticket size is going to be lower? What's your advice?
See, unfortunately, we have still not come out of our 90-day NPA. We put in norms like SMA1, SMA2, SMA3 for stressed units, SMEs. But even those, how clear is our banking system about the fact that today there is extreme stress? On one hand, the entrepreneur or the enterprise needs to pay employees. On the other hand, it has not received money due for its products or services that it might have sold in the past. At the same time, it has also to carry on all the expenses of the vaccination, the paraphernalia that you require primarily for preventing COVID or guarding against COVID. There's so many issues that we have today. There is bound to be stress when it comes to repayment of loans. So restructuring was inevitable. There needs to be proactive thinking and decision making as far as all these issues are concerned.
Let me try to answer this question in two parts. So if I look at the position of banks today, so banks on an average have capital adequacy of 15.9% as of today. Public sector banks 13.5%. The minimum requirement is 10.875%. The provision coverage ratio, which means how much of the bad loans you've already provided for, is 75%. And I would say that there is a universal, I would say, consensus that as far as large corporates are concerned, the NPA problem to a large extent is behind us. Now the next wave of NPAs is from the MSME and the retail side. So what can we do in this situation? I think there are two ways to look at it. One is how do you directly support MSMEs, whether in the form of cash support, whether in form of liquidity support, or how do you really enable the system to support MSMEs? And
Okay.
with emergency credit lines so far only covering close to about 9 million accounts, there are some, I would say 51 million accounts or enterprises, MSME enterprises, which have not got any benefit from this scheme. Therefore, even if I look at the other moves, like for example, the TLTRO, the special liquidity scheme, the partial credit guarantee, if you look at the data, it clearly indicates that it's the larger entities within both banks as well as NBFCs which have benefited from these schemes.
Sure.
The NPA story is not complete in the sense that perhaps it might come out to be lower, but then there is still pain that we know. The pain exists with a lot of the MSMEs, and so some of that will possibly come in this financial year. There is also the second wave that has possibly impacted a lot more companies again. So it's like a double whammy for many of them. And many of the MSMEs are struggling big time with either increase in raw material prices or the fact that they are not able to get their payments on time, or there's just muted demand. So all of this is leading to a situation which might mean that going forward, we might see more NPAs that might come up.
I have to take a quick break, gentlemen. We are back though in just a moment after this commercial break. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. And all of this week, we're continuing to focus on what the road ahead is looking like for India's small businesses. Even as the eye is on International MSME Day, all of this week, it's all about you. So, while everyone is pointing to challenges as far as the services sector is concerned, and, industries where there is some sort of contact which is going to be required, hospitality, tourism, etc., manufacturing doesn't seem to be in such a good shape. If you look at auto sales numbers, for instance, in May, it's almost half of what it has been previously. That has a cascading effect, one would imagine, on auto OEMs. Your advice then, your opinion on what manufacturing is possibly going to look like in the next couple of quarters? So this is something that we've been asking a lot of our experts who've joined us on the show in terms of healthcare costs being undertaken by small businesses. They're saying that, since they're bearing the vaccination costs for employees, possibly the extended family of the employees, etc., the demand or the wish really is that perhaps the government could help to bear some of that cost. How would you really view this? What is your expert advice? What is your suggestion?
Well, the first thing is in terms of our service enterprises. See, when you say movement is stopped, so whether it is travel, logistics, all your tour operators, your taxi operators, you name it. The entire movement that you have of service enterprises which are primarily offering services to other people, that is a big segment which actually buys vehicles. So if that segment is anyway not going to do anything for maybe most of the year, or maybe now more than a year, why are they going to buy any vehicles? And forget only vehicles. I will tell you that they will not buy a lot of other things also. So there is going to be reduced demand from them, which essentially means that finally your manufacturing industry is also going to bear the brunt of this. That is why I have been saying that from day one that we need to relook at the way we are actually approaching allowing enterprises to operate with the cost that all of us have when we are talking about running our operations. But no matter how much more curtailed or work from home or other mechanisms that we might talk about using cloud technologies and all of that, finally, whether I'm able to fully operate like that, A, B, whether the government has allowed me that operation, C, even if I'm allowed that operation, what is the demand in the market for my service or whatever I'm offering? Composite, if you take a composite view of the entire MSME sector,
Yeah.
we looked at, there are less than 12% of MSMEs which are actually digitized across the country. So without digitization, without them being aware of all the tools that are there, all the things that they can use to create processes, systems, procedures, and then obviously work from home, which is through maybe enterprise mobility or other mechanisms. Without that, you will not have MSMEs be able to do anything. Now, if we are unable to do anything, if we are unable to operate, what is the other option that we have? We shut down. And the stress that is there amongst entrepreneurs today, especially after the second wave, I can share with you that we've got, out of a survey that we are currently doing with Unido, we've got almost 40% of manufacturing firms saying they are going to relook at their business operations. And out of the service enterprises, there's an amazing figure. It's 67% of enterprises who are saying they need to reinvent their business completely and maybe even shed all the employees. So it is going to be a dangerous situation, and I feel we need to look at how can we help these companies reinvent, companies, enterprises, all of them. How can we help them reinvent their business? How can we create business models which are globally competitive from day one? How can they have innovation as the base of whatever they do, so they are able to sustain, any sort of disruption, whether today or tomorrow or in the future? And how do we enable them with all sorts of technological tools that so that they are able to handle all these times of stress?
Yeah,
It's not a very difficult thing.
sure.
Smaller countries around the world have been able to handle all of this very easily. But in India, you see, my other problem is that you have on one hand this federal structure, and then you have industry or MSMEs, which are a part of the state subject. So you find even between states, progressive states and non-progressive states, and then you have the states which have fallen back, which even today do not have a startup cell or do not have an MSME department. They are far behind. So, and the states could be, you could be living in one city which could be 60 kilometers away from the other city in a different state, and completely different rules, completely different laws. I don't know whether there is a basic, I would say, fault line somewhere when we are talking about industry, and whether that industry should be allowed to be under multiple governance mechanisms, multiple set of laws.
Yeah, I would agree with most of what Vinod has mentioned. I think while today the focus is on making sure that you provide some oxygen or some life support in the form of some credit, right? Beyond that, we need to think of what more we need to do, because today MSMEs also, possibly most of them, have realized that they need to fundamentally change the way they've done business. So, and this is a issue which has been there for many years. We have not really invested in strengthening MSMEs at the grassroots level. We are not enabled them to really adopt global best practices. So today, because the mindset is there, that is a golden opportunity to really make that intervention at a policy level, at a coordinated state and central government level, to make sure that whatever it takes to really make our MSMEs globally competitive, we do that. Because without that, we can't dream of 8%, 9% GDP growth on a sustainable basis. So therefore, it's very important that we start talking about these issues. But frankly, I don't hear these kind of issues or these kind of conversations happening right now in policy circles.
Well, in terms of the vaccine costs, certainly the government has made it free. So I think that's a huge benefit to MSMEs as well, where they not just themselves, but their labor force can also get themselves vaccinated. From a healthcare perspective, the government's insurance plans that they have, the Ayushman healthcare insurance scheme, I think the proliferation of that is very important, and the fact that more and more people should get it. And in fact, MSME should be perhaps incentivized in some manner to for people to take up those plans, to prompt them to take up those plans would be really beneficial for actually bringing down the healthcare cost for MSME employees and labor.
All right, I have one last question then. What advice would you have for someone watching today's interview? I want to leave this conversation at that.
I would say very simply that uh, no matter, one can't undo what has happened in the past, but possibly, I think for small businesses, this is a grim reminder of the importance of financial discipline, because lot of our small businesses have created a lot of assets, but possibly liquidity is something they lack. So learning from this experience to really plan, be financially disciplined, and also strengthening businesses structurally for the future by making investments in technology and also digital adoption. This would be my suggestion.
I agree with Ajay there. I say three words primarily. The first is innovation. If your company is not into, I would say, vertical and horizontal innovation, you are going to be out of that business, because newer companies, youth are going to come and disrupt this space, and you have no other option but to shut down. Second is, for staying on top of your operations, your procedures, your customer relationships, your entire business, whether it's finances, whether it's your cash flows, whether it's your supply chain, you need to digitize. If you cannot digitize in this time and age, you are out of business any which ways, because there'll be a better guy who will come along and shut you down. Simple. Third is, if you are not globally oriented, if you are not thinking about exports, if you are not thinking about global markets, either your next door neighbor will shut you down, or somebody will come from there and shut you down. So these three things, if any SME in India is not thinking about these three things, he is in the danger of shutting down in the very near future.
So for MSMEs to be really growth oriented and be futuristic basically grow from an MSME to a large entity, you need to be doing a lot of things. And the first most important thing is actually having a mindset change. And the mindset change means that you have to look at being progressive, you have to look at being competitive, agile, and responsive. And one of the other aspects of this is actually being compliant. There's only 12 million enterprises in India that are GST registered, for example. So as and when companies get more formalized in the MSME space, you would see a lot of benefits as an organization. So that could be government benefits, that could be benefits from the bank. Just the recognition will change, the way that you're operating will change. Yes, it is challenging initially, but clearly to be competitive in the long run, this mindset change will be very, very critical.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Completely out of time in this episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. As always, we look forward to your feedback. Do send them to us. Our contact details are on your screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.